Oh, wait. Are we live?
We are live. We were having
StreamYard
trouble.
is
We were having trouble going live before.
StreamYard is having issues tonight, so let's get this show on the road before something happens. Woo woo!
I mentioned the 15-minute rule that we were going to try for 15 minutes to go live before, and then I was like, "We're canceled if we don't get to the 15-minute mark." It's funny. It was like I knew that it was going to go live right then.
Like, it was wild there it was touch and go there for a second because StreamYard kept notifying us, like, oh, there's high volume traffic right now and it's causing errors. And I kept trying to click live and it was like, can't do it. Wait for 30 seconds. It was very strange. StreamYard, please get that poop in a group because we don't want to be dealing with that again.
Add a new server to the block to handle the traffic.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm going to be honest. StreamYard has been growing. It's kind of like one of the biggest streaming platforms now because they're so
Is it
user
really?
friendly. Yeah, they're so user friendly, and I don't blame them for growing. But you gotta have the oomph to be able to support all that.
And everybody has a podcast now. Everybody has a podcast.
I know. Well, we got one before it got popular.
I know, because we're cool like that. We've had a podcast for 5 years now.
5 years. We're one of the cool. We're the cool kids.
We're the cool kids.
I always wanted to be a cool kid.
Ooh.
Ooh. Well, everyone, welcome back to Restitching the Tapestry. We're at episode 159, season 5, episode 159. Tonight's topic is going to be misinformation and media literacy, and we're pretty excited to talk about this. So we're gonna be covering so many layers tonight. We're gonna be talking about a lot of current event stuff too. You'll get to listen to me deliver a soliloquy about somebody who really annoyed me. So beyond that, Ari, how have you been? What have you been up to?
So I'm in my hardest class yet, which is American Renaissance, which deals with post-revolutionary American literature. So we started week 1 with antebellum literature, which is Rip Van Winkle, and some like post-civil or post-American Revolution poetry. So like 1820s, like 1810s, 1820s literature.
Are we thinking like, this, I think that's prior to Mark Twain, isn't it?
It's prior to Mark Twain.
Yeah.
But so I was like, so I had to, the amount of work that I have to do for this class is above and beyond what I've had to do. I think the only other class that kind of comes close to this one is my literary analysis class,
Mm-hmm.
in which I was like writing, just doing constant reading and writing in that class, just constant like long papers and things like that. So I had to write for week 1 a 4-page close reading of Sleepy Hollow.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
this 4-page paper, when usually most of my classes it's like a 500-word journal for the first week. And I'm like, this is where we're starting.
You are hitting the ground running with that.
Absolutely.
For me, what have I been up to? Mostly been doing a lot of gardening lately. I don't know if you follow me on social media, but you probably saw that I posted a photo of my garden, which I have not worked up yet because we're waiting for the, freezes to stop at night.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I went out there, and keep in mind, we have already started about 80 tomato plants. We have like 80 tomato plants that we started from seed. I went out to my garden and found that tomatoes that had fallen during fall last year, ones that we missed, they all went to seed. And now I have like 200 tomato plants.
Did you count them all?
I mean, it's a rough guesstimate, but like, it's a significant number of tomato plants. I will not be able to keep all of them because there's just so many. So I've been like trying to dig them out and put them in pots because I'm going to do a roadside tomato plant sale
That is amazing.
in the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to be embracing my garden nymph, sun hat wearing, sundress wearing grandmotherly life and doing my little garden sale.
You should put it on
And
Marketplace and be like, tomato plants for sale.
come get these tomato plants. You know, it might be a sunsweet cherry tomato. It might be a regular cherry tomato. I don't know. Be surprised.
It might even sprout into an heirloom.
Heaven forbid it be a Roma.
Oh,
Oh, I love a good Roma.
blasphemous. I love it. You got some good Italian food going on.
I know that. So my mom's going to come down and is going to help us do some canning. So hopefully we will be able to do that. I think that's going to be nice.
Yeah.
I remember canning with my grandmother when I was a kid, but it's been so long that I can barely remember like what it involves, what it entails. But ultimately, I think it's going to
I
be
think
fun.
you have to boil the jars and then
And like a pool of like hot, like it's not like too full. Like it's like a small pool
it's
of
like
water, and
2/3 of the way, or like, yeah, half to 2/3 of the way. You have to disinfect the jars too. Um,
mm-hmm.
and that you have to when you can them, you have to put the lids on and like you have to seal it up and yeah.
Yeah. So nobody's been coming on yet tonight. I wonder if there's bigger issues with StreamYard going on.
I'm not sure, but let's just keep going. If
Let's
they want
keep
to return
going.
the rerun.
Let's manifest success, right? So, current event snapshot. There's been a lot of stuff happening. So I don't know if you've seen this, but there was a video circulating across social media, all social media, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, about the Kansas City Chiefs kicker, Harrison Butker. He spoke at a college in Kansas. It's Benedictine College. I think it's a small Catholic college. And he delivered a graduation commencement speech to a large, crowd of women who were graduating. And basically, this entire speech focused on like glorifying the fact that his wife quit her career to marry him and become a homemaker, and he literally used that exact wording. He says, "I'm on the stage today." This is him quoting him. "I'm on the stage today, being the man that I am because I have a wife who leans into her vocation and embraces the one of the most important titles of all, homemaker." And then he then connected it to this very strange conversation about masculinity and how masculinity has been attacked in America over the last however long. And he said, as men, we set the tone of the culture. Be unapologetic in your masculinity, fighting against the cultural emasculation of men.
So if this is some Margaret Atwood stuff.
I know. I was just like, is this Gilead? Like, is this some Handmaid's Tale ridiculousness that we are leaning into right now? What is going on?
I mean, if that's not like be a procreating baby mama and like create children for the glory of Gilead.
It's terrifying. So, like, Ari and I were talking in the back room about this. Like, obviously, if whatever route they choose to take in life, like, that's totally great. Like, if they opt to, be a homemaker and they want to, uh, create a family and live that kind of like American dream white picket fence life, like, that's entirely their choice. But for me, like, listening to his speech, like, it almost felt like he was using that to weaponize, those stances against groups of people, women notably. He
Like that
later,
it was their only option.
yeah. Yeah, like he basically was suggesting that, oh, you've been not to follow the theme of our episode. You've been misinformed about what you should do with your life. Here is the purest thing that you could do, kind of a thing.
But it's like,
And
but what he's saying is that if you don't do this, you're creating a culture in which men are in feeling inferior, and that you're creating a culture in which men will feel like you're emasculating them if you choose to not have children and go into the
mhm,
workplace.
yeah. It just really brings me back to the bear versus man in the woods type of thing. Like he is absolutely who people would choose, or the people would choose the bear over him. He is literally the avatar of what that scenario represents. Now,
Did you see the Bumble advertisement?
oh my god, talk about that. I did see that, and then I'll finish off talking about him.
So there was a Bumble advertisement about celibacy, about like, you really don't want to be celibate, do you? And like, and it was just talking about like how women are supposed to feed into men's sexual desires. And it had like a picture of like a young, hip woman of color on the billboard, that like it's supposed to be like you're supposed to be owning your sexuality or something like that by giving into men's desires and things like that. It was really weird, tone deaf.
Ooh, I don't like that.
But the thing about it is because women are not choosing men, women are choosing themselves, and they're not choosing to have sex recently.
Hmm.
Because that was the thing with my generation, the millennial women, is that we owned sex as a form of like self-expression, like with the third wave feminism movement,
Hmm.
is that we were using sex as a way of like self-empowerment, and that got used against us as a way of trying to oh, you want to use sex for empowerment? We're going to flip this on our head and we're going to abuse you with that. And so now
Right.
Gen Z women are like, we saw what happened to the millennials. We saw
Hmm.
how they used sex against them in their self empowerment. We're not going to do any of that. We're going to
Yeah.
choose celibacy.
Well, and that my understanding is that that movement originated in South Korea, the 4B movement. I've been reading up on that, where like women in South Korea have been so devalued by men over there that they're just like, and now and there's been like talk of like the birth rates of South Korea like dwindling considerably as a result of this, and it's like this is a form of protest when you think about it. Like if like stop treating people terribly, like stop treating people like they are not human.
Right. But it's like that in the United States too, that men, the bar is so low with men that there's no point in choosing somebody who's going to devalue you. And then you get married and get into a relationship, and these men will weaponize incompetence in
Mm-hmm.
order to not do the bare minimum to help out in a relationship. So why get in a relationship with them in the first place?
I'm smelling an episode idea. Weaponized incompetence.
Yeah.
We're
But that's
good.
that's part of the reason why I haven't been married up until this point, is because I would get into relationships with people who would just take and take and take from me,
Mm,
and I would just be
yeah.
like,
You
"Why do
know,
I want?"
many of my prior relationships were like that too, and then I finally found one where like there is some reciprocation, and it felt so foreign to me. I was
Mhm.
just like, should I accept this? Like, am I worthy? Arpy's here. Hey, Arpy, it's good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Well, and so this Harrison Butker guy is literally an exact example of that problem manifested here in the United States, and the fact that he is a celebrity as well just adds more insult to injury, because not only does he have the privilege of being white, he has the privilege of being a man, he has the privilege of being a celebrity, he has so much access, and the fact that he was given this platform to perpetuate this just really, I mean, everybody can have their opinion, of course, right? But like That's a very powerful platform to have. Now, he also used this commencement speech to take swipes at other things as well, including the LGBTQ plus community. He encouraged graduates to have Catholic pride, but, quote, not the deadly sin sort of pride that has an entire month dedicated to it, end quote. That's not pointed, is it? And he also used the opportunity to attack DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, by saying, quote, the world around us says that we should keep our beliefs to ourselves whenever they go against the tyranny of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Wow. He's
Using the
just
word
he's just really hitting
tyranny?
all he's just really hitting all the points of he just wants to really shock people and get people talking about him, doesn't he?
Ari, he's not climbing down the bigotry and hitting all the branches. He's cannonballing.
It's just I understand that he's speaking at a Catholic college, but the fact is that
Right.
he really just wanted to just kind of get that attention, didn't he? He really just
Well,
wanted all that attention.
and I understand, yeah, because we do have to think about the audience context, right? So, like, a Catholic college would obviously have an audience that's very receptive to that type of message, but he knows that that video would get disseminated throughout media, social media, right? Um, the NFL has already distanced themselves from him by saying that that what he says does not reflect um, all of that. And interestingly, I was doing some research. Apparently, his mom is a world renowned physicist. I don't know why I put therapist in the notes, but world renowned physicist. And there were some people debating, like, maybe these are some, like, mommy issues. We can't diagnose people, obviously, but so many people have been kind of like, maybe he's kind of retaliatory against women because of that. This is a Godzilla shirt, by the way, RP, not an and this is a census fail hat, so but thank you.
I'm not sure, um, because are you saying because his mom is like really into like a career and has like a career of her own that she's
Right.
not a good homemaker, so
No,
he's like,
that's kind of like his fuel for this messaging, yeah.
oh, so he's like criticizing his own mother for not being like the homemaker that he wanted her to be or something?
That's what I've seen a lot of the think pieces saying, yes.
That's
Um,
that's crazy.
yeah. So, but yeah, it's out there if you want to go listen to that. Like, I don't encourage you listening to it because it's very difficult to actually listen to, but it's out there. So, other current events. Currently, going back to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, which we've been trying to touch on every episode so far. There is a famine right now that is actually exasperating the humanitarian crisis because there's little access to food. There's there's lack of access to, like, cultivation, so on and so forth. So there are a lot of different charities out there that are trying to, help remedy that situation.
Will you put that
Um,
link in the description for
yeah,
people?
that the link is already in the description. There is the World Food Program. They are an organization that provides that type of humanitarian support to, especially to the Palestinians right now. But I know that they're providing that support to everybody in that region currently. So,
Yeah.
um, like, I know, like, for a lot of people, they might seem powerless. Like, I know there's been this huge push, especially with, I think we talked about this last episode about, like, blocking celebrities if they're not, like, using their platforms. But if you feel stuck and you're not really sure what to do, like, to even inform yourself, like, look at these charities because they provide a lot of very helpful information. Other things. So what else is on our current event snapshot, Ari?
So this last week I got involved, not personally, but I haven't really said much about it or like commented on it, but I've been kind of eyeing this Drake versus Kendrick beef. Just watching the videos
Oh.
and listening to people's commentary about it. Because well, it started where J. Cole was like, oh, he did a song where J. Cole, Drake, and Kendrick were like the top three performers. And then Kendrick was like, he did a song um called Like Them, where he said, there's no big three, there's only big me. And
Mm-hmm.
it kept going. And he's like, you don't want me to come after you. I'll put you in the cemetery. I'll put you down. And so this goes back and forth. I'm a bad describer of this. There, if you watch the videos, a lot of other people disseminate the lyrical genius of Kendrick much better than I do. But basically, Drake and Kendrick went back and forth, and
Mm-hmm.
Drake's, although Drake's has a couple of good songs, they're not as good or on par with Kendrick's, and that
Mm-hmm.
Kendrick released song after like two or three songs right back to back, and they just like, if you listen to Meet the Grams after Drake had released Family Matters, it is haunting. Is haunting.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a song that is um addressed to his son Adonis, and it
Mm-hmm.
talks about Drake having a daughter that is an illegitimate daughter
Oh, yes, I remember hearing
that's
about
that's
that.
older than Adonis, and she's 11. But it also refers to the fact that Drake messages minors like Millie Bobby Brown
Mm-hmm.
from uh,
From
from
Stranger
from
Things,
Stranger
yes.
Things, and that he likes to text minors. And he kind of referred to that and that he runs a child sex ring, and that he's not a very good person, and
Mm-hmm.
that he's actually quite a disgusting human being.
Right.
And he refers and he talks about, he just eviscerates him in that in Meet the Grams. Um, the music sounds like horror film music to me, and if you listen to it, it's quite disturbing. It's not disturbing to the fact of where you're like, but it's just like you witness almost a slaughter in that song
Mm-hmm.
of his character and his life, and it's just like, wow, this is horrifying. And then and
He was
then he
preparing. He was
and then
prepared.
and then you listen to Not Like Us, which is the next song he released, which Drake said in a song that he was the hit maker, and that he's the one who always has these top hits because he's one of the richest rap stars out there, and he has all of this money from like creating all of these number one hits, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
Kendrick fires back with Not Like Us, which is very catchy. It's very catchy. It's been in my head for the last couple of days. Every so often I'll just be like, they're not like us. They're not like us. And I'll just be like, get out of my head. But like it's literally like West Coast sound, because he brought up West Coast music such as like Tupac's music. So
Mm-hmm.
they brought up Tupac's sound, the West Coast sound, and
Oh,
they
okay.
and the lyrical line that everybody was like, oh, he said that, is he tries to strike a chord, but he hit a minor. And it was, if you listen to that song, it is so, it you just will be in shock. It's like, and he goes, he tries to strike a chord, but he hit a minor. And it's like, oh
Oh,
my god, I cannot believe he said that. But
oh my
also,
God.
he says it in such like a poppy way that is so hilarious and so sad. And it's like he's just like walking over Drake's dead body, just like doing a victory lap because he has assassinated his character at this point.
I have been seeing people saying that Kendrick totally won.
He has, in my opinion, because Drake tried to fire back with the Heart Part 6, and he's just trying to defend himself at this point.
Mm-hmm.
He did a very poor job. He basically said, if I'm not as I would be arrested if I weren't as famous as I were, which if you know Epstein,
Ugh.
I mean, it's a very poor defense.
That is a terrible defense. I just realized we're at 25 minutes. Do we
I
want to?
know, I got excited.
No, I think that you were worried about not describing it well, and I think that was a very good description of it. I think
Okay.
it's my turn, right?
All right. Yes.
All right, here we go. We live in a dynamic society where social media shapes us by creating greater opportunities for connection. It has led to a developing understanding of the adversity many marginalized communities face, the powers causing the adversity, and those who act as bystanders as atrocities take place in real time. Our goal with this show is to make connections and have challenging conversations about social topics, current events, pop culture, and art. Together, let's weave the threads of understanding with what privilege we have in order to learn, educate, and create in a world that's growing. Bam. So, we talk about media a lot. I mean, we were just talking about media in several different ways during our current event snapshot. And obviously, being that we live in the technology age, media is so central to our everyday life that it impacts the way we access information, the way we interpret information, the way we process information. So we were like, let's do an episode talking about misinformation and media literacy. I don't know why I'm shimmying.
Because
But
it's something worth shimmying about.
because it's fun. I love talking. I actually have an article that I assign my students about misinformation and media literacy, and it often turns into a very fascinating conversation about our levels of distraction when it comes to media, like what we're exposed to, whether or not we have like an understanding of the relationship between speaker and audience, right? Um, I want to begin by defining what media literacy is. So if many of you are listening to this and you're like, media literacy, that's an interesting term. Like what is that? According to Monmouth University, media literacy is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication. It is an essential life skill that empowers you to be both a critical thinker and an effective communicator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now I've seen other definitions out there as well that kind of like focus on specific aspects of that, but I felt that one was a pretty comprehensive definition. Ari, when were you first exposed to the term media literacy?
I think my undergraduate degree, when I was studying journalism, they really were hammering into us during my undergraduate degree at Central. They wanted us to know about what media literacy was because we were creating as journalists the media that people were going to absorb and understand from us. So they wanted us to develop a sense of media literacy as creators of that media, so that when we create those things, that we have this ability to disseminate what we're creating and kind of understand, like from a perspective, um, you know, the things that we're creating,
Mm,
kind of the deeper meanings of those things, and to
yeah.
read between the lines of what we're creating before we put those out there, so we don't overstep our boundaries or get into gray areas.
Right. I mean, it has everything to do with audience awareness, right? It's interesting. I did not really learn more about media literacy until my master's program. And
Oh.
that could be because I didn't take any journalism classes during my undergrad, so that is a very central route to journalism.
Mhm.
So when I finally took like graduate level classes, part of my expertise is in composition and rhetoric.
Yeah.
And like in talking about like say like the rhetorical situation, there were many conversations about like media literacy, people whether or not people know the complexity of the relationship between speaker and audience, etc. And it was very eye-opening for me because like I never really realized that that was very significant and crucial in, you know, building a thoughtful discourse with people, like especially if you
Mhm.
have a following on the internet, right? And I think this became very crucial during my master's program because I started my master's in 2014. Um, and if memory serves me correctly, I think the Black Lives Matter movement started in 2014,
Around that time, yeah.
with the tragedy that happened in Ferguson, Missouri, right?
I think Trayvon Martin was the first instance of the Black
Right.
Lives Matter movement. I was working for Johnson Publishing because I worked for Hearst Magazines, and one of our publishers that we worked for was Johnson Publishing. So I heard a lot of people chattering about Trayvon Martin, but I also saw the articles that Ebony and Jet put out about Trayvon Martin's um, death.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read a lot about like those original, like
Yeah.
I read the original articles that they were writing about like the story and how they defended I'm not sure what his name is anymore. I try to forget um his
Oh,
actions
yeah.
for shooting Trayvon.
Yeah. Um, it was a very like so that year because there that's when I think at least for me the conversation about misinformation and media literacy became so significant because Facebook became kind of like this cesspool of like misinformation where like people were just spreading like a lot of hate and a lot of like misleading like details related to those events. And
I would say it started a long time before that, but that is
well,
one
I
of the
think
more
I
modern
think it was
circumstances.
it started before that, but it was distinct spike at that time. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm saying it in the context that that's when I started becoming aware of it because due
Mhm.
to my own privilege, like that
Yeah.
wasn't something that really was at the forefront of my mind, right?
Well, Facebook
Um,
in general is just a place where a lot of misinformation got spread. And even though we grew, and I hear this a lot, a lot of millennials talk about this. Boomers raised us to say, not everything you read on the internet is true. You remember that growing up?
oh,
Boomers
don't
used to tell
I?
boomers used to tell us growing up all the time. Our parents, teachers at school, everything. Not everything you read on the internet is true. You should always be discerning of the things that you read on the internet. And then as we grew older, those same boomers were the same people who started getting their facts from things like Facebook, from these weird websites, and started
Mm-hmm.
taking those things as facts. And these were the same people who became like flat earthers and like 5G antenna people and like vaccine deniers and things.
Oh, I forgot about the 5G antenna people. It's true though. It's absolutely true. Well, I mean, so the first question we have, like, why are we like, are we currently living in an age of misinformation?
I would say yes. One of the biggest, you know what the biggest conspiracy theory that I'm hearing lately, that
What?
goes around like on TikTok and stuff is chemtrails. People are so concerned about
Oh, people have been
chemtrails.
worried about that for a while.
I know, but like that's such a big thing. I always hear about people talking about the chemtrails.
I've heard that too. I think
Like
it's safe to say that,
they're like it's causing so much cancer in young people and that everybody's getting cancer because of the chemtrails.
well, so I think we can safely say that most of the misinformation that we see is always some sort of fear mongering.
Mhm. It's
Like
trying to make you paranoid to go outside and do stuff.
another one that I see all the time are I'm always seeing these articles and think pieces about Yellowstone supervolcano where people are
Oh,
like,
that's actually
it's
true. The super
oh,
volcano
it's
is true,
true.
but the likeliness of it,
It's
erupting as
true,
probably.
but people are making up details associated with it and inflating the gravity of those details to garner a reaction,
Like, what
right?
are they saying?
Like I saw one that was like, and it was debunked, but there was like this. I remember seeing this one where they were like, "There's an entire like mountain that caved in Yellowstone." Like we'd be hearing about that. Like there was another one where they were like apparently like there was like a mass die off in Yellowstone or something like that. I did some research and there have been like some instances where like there have been pockets in Yellowstone where like maybe animals were exposed to acid, like acidic water or something like that. But they made it seem like they literally used words like extinction level, blah, kind of.
Oh goodness.
And I'm just like, way to freak people out. Like, I mean, obviously we should be mindful of things, but
I'm glad that my feeds are not quite that bad. I always see things about like with the use of like AI and AI generated like video and stuff,
yeah,
you can create a lot of like misinformation because you have like President Obama or like Trump or like Biden, and they make these like AI, it'll be like TikToks or like videos or something, and and it's obviously fake, but like they'll disseminate like information or like false things that look genuine, and if like you're
yeah,
not if you don't have any media literacy, you'll think that they're real because you're not being aware of
yeah,
those things. It's kind of like how or like using celebrity, like the AI generated like celebrity stuff,
yeah,
and like if you're not paying attention, like it might just kind of go across your awareness, and like you're not aware that that is not real. And so some people will take it as like
yeah,
fact that this thing happened, or like this thing was real, or what they saw was real. Then so like it's I think that TikTok especially like has
hmm,
created an atmosphere of where media literacy has gone down because um they're scrolling so fast. So you watch a 3 minute video and then you scroll and you watch a 3 minute video and you scroll.
not
And
even
so
3 minutes, like 10 seconds. Don't get me wrong. Like TikTok's been a great space for creativity and mobilization, so on and so forth. But like any social media app, misinformation bleeds through, right? It's interesting that you bring that up because in some ways, like those of us who do have like experience or training with regard to media literacy, like it's almost easy for us to just laugh at those people, right? But almost in this day and age, when you think about it, because of the state of education, like media literacy is a privilege. Like it's a we have a degree of privilege through having media literacy. And I feel like it's a privilege everybody should be granted, but due to that access to education or like the quality of education, like that brings a concern, right?
because I actually mentioned that later on, that the access to secondary sources, such as like academic papers about literature or about media in general, should that be available to all people, not just the education field, not just students and education
Right.
providers. Because I
Yeah.
feel like that's something that you don't often see people reading just for fun. Like people don't analyze their literature,
Right.
or
Yeah.
if they're reading at all, or if they're looking at movies or TV shows or these things, and they're thinking about the deeper context of those things.
Yeah. RP brings up a good point. Like checking, like fact checking, that is very important, right? And but the issue is that a lot of people don't have the expertise or the resources or knowledge to do that, right? And I think so. The next question is: does social wait? The next
Well,
one of
that
the
was
questions is how.
the reason why Trump won the 2016 election, is that
Mhm.
CNN, these news media outlets, would just play his speeches uninterrupted. It would just play and play and play. There would be no fact checking. They would just play his speeches um,
Yeah.
on end, and people would just listen to his speeches and think everything he's saying is true, honest to God fact, even though it was
Yeah.
just they were allowing this propaganda to run and run and run.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, I mean, one of the questions is how did the pandemic impact misinformation and media literacy? Going back to that education component, I really think that the pandemic significantly complicated um, misinformation and media literacy. Obviously, because at that point in time, like we had nothing but the internet to turn to for any
Well,
sense of
and
security.
during during that time, we also had been especially with like again with Facebook and social media, we had gone through the 2016 election where the election had been influenced by Russia, and that
Mm-hmm.
we found that Russia was guilty of using infiltrators to our social media systems to influence the way that our American people thought and believed by creating these fake news articles, this propaganda that
Mm-hmm.
was not fact checked and was not in Trump's favor. And it was they used certain tactics to incite people to be enraged, and
Mm. Yeah.
to anger and to hate, and to certain polarizations. And
Yeah.
so using, I think that the pandemic was an extension of that, is that we were living in that post 2016 age where people were feeling vulnerable. And then you had the rise in 2020 during the pandemic of, because everybody's at home, sitting at home on TikTok, which is vulnerable to misinformation because anybody can post anything they want. It's using Chinese systems, so it's not under the same regulations and rules that under American, systems are. So you have this you can it has different censorship rules that the United States doesn't use. So
Mm-hmm.
the things that are being pushed onto your For You page are under the propaganda systems of Chinese thought. Not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing; it's just a different way of thinking. But
Right.
but the way that they're pushing their agendas, China does often create a narrative for their people, and they often create a narrative that often blacklist certain things. And even in their own culture, they have certain things that are cut off, like Google and Facebook and those
Even
things.
TikTok is not. I think TikTok is banned over there too.
I think they have a version of TikTok that it's not the same TikTok as that we have, but it's a different
No.
version of it.
Yeah. It's so complex, but there's so many turning pieces that I think that people just get lost in it, right? Which is
Yeah.
why I think, I mean, bringing this back to education, that's why like teaching media literacy is so unbelievably important. And honestly, I know working actively with students, because when they get to the college level, like that's when they begin learning about media literacy, especially in like a communications class or like an English composition class, rhetoric, journalism, etc. um, Many of them, like when they were in high school during the pandemic, it was just survival mode.
Hmm.
And like those key areas weren't built, which would normally begin at that time, right? So, like,
Yeah.
coming into college, like, it's almost like an entirely new world being introduced to media literacy, the rhetorical situation, the important questions to ask ourselves if we are confronted with something that, we might suspect could be misinformation, right?
Well, they're also saying that even though millennials are the most educated generation, that it's lagging in, say, Gen Z as well as the next generation, that they're, because they're younger, they're just not as educated as us. So their skills are, they're trying to build up their skills with us, and they're having trouble keeping up with the same amount of
Mm.
education that we are.
Well, and thinking about the cost of education, that's a huge accessibility problem, right?
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm saying, like, being
Yeah.
able to educate themselves in certain aspects in things like media literacy. Although with this Drake Kendrick beef, might I say that it has gotten people to analyze the lyrical poetry, and that people's ability to display media literacy is amazing.
And let's be honest, a Swiftie absolutely knows how to analyze a lyric.
I know. They write dissertations on things when it seems like it's applicable, but then they don't apply it to other things such as news articles
Mm-hmm.
or propaganda that's coming from people like Trump, or media sources that are
Yeah.
either right winged or left winged, and that they're not disseminating that information in the same manner.
I think it's like, I think one thing that's difficult too is that I think part of media literacy training or education has a lot to do with like knowing to separate your emotional reaction to something versus like the instinct of like, okay, let's find some secondary sources to corroborate this to see like if this is actually true or not, right? Whereas
Might
like
I
a lot of
suggest might I suggest if you go on Google Scholar and you see a DOI article that you really want to read, but you're stuck because you don't have the education, like institution to use those, might I suggest using Sci-Hub? Because I use Sci-Hub even as a graduate student. Basically, what it does is it unlocks the article without having to pay for it.
mm-hmm, that's a good idea. And it if it comes to like reading compre because like let's be honest, like a lot of people struggle too because of the reading comprehension aspect of it.
Because I
Um
have watched so many scientific articles and so many academic papers with that Sci-Hub, and I swear to God, it has helped me become a more learned person because of it.
I love that. I love that. Well, the reading comprehension tidbit, like, because I don't know about you, but like, like, if I might find something that is so intimidating that it's over my head, right? Like, I think we've all been there.
Mhm.
I teach this in my classes. There's a reading process method called the SQ3R method,
Mhm.
which kind of guides you on some steps and like, okay, if you're confronted with something very difficult to read, here is how you break it down into pieces. It asks you to skim or scan the document by like skimming like its headings, its graphics. It asks you then to pose questions like who, what, when, where, why. Those are like the good basic first questions to ask yourself if you're developing media literacy. Um, Going through and then making sure that you are doing a deep read at a certain point instead of just skimming. The issue is that so many people skim everything. You know,
Yeah.
because of time, we're on this late stage capitalistic assembly line of we don't have time. We got to get to work. We gotta go get our
Scroll on social
coffee,
media, which wastes hours and hours and hours of time.
or that too. Well, okay, so we're nearing the latter portion of the episode. So, do you spend time reading and do you read academic papers? It sounds like you do, Ari. Do you want to talk about that? You talked
So
about the accessibility.
I so in the last couple years, I have learned that in the evenings, I don't like using my phone for a lot of I don't use my phone for a lot of social media scrolling, because I feel like it's bad for my mental health after a certain hour to scroll on social media. Sometimes I will, but what I try to do is I try to mitigate some of the time that I spend on social media by reading, at least
Mm,
for an hour in the evening, if not 2 to 3 hours in the night, um, before I go to bed. So I can usually read either a book every couple days or every 2 or 3 days, um,
mm-hmm.
pretty reasonably fast, especially if it's a good book. I'll read it pretty quickly. But I have usually a couple, 2 to 3 books going at once, and I take notes on it. 'Cause
Oh, I
what I
love
do,
taking notes.
let me show you. I have a book.
While you find it, if you are really wanting to build your media literacy, make reading fun for yourself, right? Like annotate it, take notes, get out some sticky notes.
I take notes on my books as I'm reading.
Oh, I
I take
love
notes,
that.
and I have a commonplace book that I transfer them to after I'm done reading the book. So I have a book of just quotes that I use for like academic, because sometimes I'll just write papers for fun. You don't have to, but I like writing
Ari,
papers.
we're nerds.
I'm a nerd.
We are
Um,
nerds. I love writing papers. I miss writing papers. Like I
that's why
tell
I
my
have a
students
Substack.
this.
It's that's for that. I have a Substack simply because I like writing papers for fun.
I tell my students this sometimes because like if I had like oh this 5-page paper, well they'll be like oh 5 page, and I'm just like I would love to write a 5-page paper.
I
Let
have
me
literally
tell
written
you.
like 4 or 5 page papers in the last month. I wrote
I
I wrote a couple 9 page papers just for
all
reading.
y'all if you've not checked out Ari's Substack, it's brilliant honestly.
It's a little messy, but it's fun.
I think people should check it out. I'm gonna throw a link in the description of this video.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
I think you sh I think you should. If people wanna get my newsletter in their email, they can. I
It's
haven't
so
written in a couple
fun.
days. I was feeling kinda bad about it. I was like, "Oh, I don't know if people wanna read my Substack."
I like there's something just about getting an email with a newsletter. It
I
is
get your WordPress emails, and I love your WordPress emails.
I
I
need to
think
start writing on that more. I need to start writing on that more.
yeah.
Um so our ideas about literature, we've already kind of talked about this too. Are the ideas about literature and the analysis of previous literature constantly evolving, thus changing how we evaluate? I would say so, yeah. I mean, I think that like language itself is a living, breathing thing when you think about it, because it's growing, it's shifting, it's adding in new things, and I think as a result, the way we analyze and assess things shifts as well, right?
Have there been any recent music, books, or pieces of media that have been interpreted poorly by people online or in reviews due to a lack of media literacy?
Ooh.
Taylor Swift's song. That song was
Hmm.
recently misinterpreted. Speaking of Taylor Swift,
Oh, the
um,
one with the 1830s lyric, right?
right,
Yeah.
that was definitely misinterpreted. It wasn't as bad as people thought. She wasn't trying to romanticize going back to the 1830s. It was talking about how she said, "Oh, I could go back to the 1830s, but again, that time was kind of racist and it kind of sucked. So maybe I don't want to go back to those times." And she's thinking about how all of these times in history that we think we want to go back to, these past moments where maybe she thought she wanted to go back to being with this partner that she was with. We romanticize going back to these moments that we thought
Mm.
we liked. They actually aren't as great as we thought they were, but like just the line itself kind of seems bad on the surface if you just like take it as the line itself instead of doing the deeper analysis of the song.
See, I thought, like, I've just found it to be a very interesting commentary on nostalgia and how toxic nostalgia can cause people to just get lost in certain things regardless of the ramifications, right?
Right. It's about, like,
Um,
wanting to go back to a different time, and just, like, thinking about going back to that time, like, can create, well, it's just, like, saying, "Oh, I wanna go back to this time," but then, like, thinking about it even deeper, like, those times were not that great,
right.
actually.
Yeah, not so much, right? Um, so our final question then we will talk about like solutions of like how to improve misinformation and media literacy. So, are all interpretations of literature valid as long as it's backed up with evidence supported by the work? Do you always need the use of secondary sources in order to make a criticism? So, I I think it's helpful to have those secondary sources, mostly because in language in general, like when there is communal consensus on something, that creates like a sense of like, okay, like this is corroborated by multiple people, therefore that kind of gives it the grounds of truth, right? How would you, I
Mhm.
mean, from a journalist's perspective, how would you answer that question?
So for me, it depends. It depends on because if you're just like reviewing a movie and you're just like, I'm giving this criticism of the movie, and I'm using what's happening in the movie and I'm analyzing what's happening in the movie. I'm just doing an analysis of the work.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily need secondary sources. It makes it better if you use secondary sources such as other movies to support it and kind of build that framework, or if you use uh, other like secondary sources such as like literature on the subject of other people doing analysis on it, or like
Yeah.
other people like psychology papers or other things that talk about it that kind of support your evidence,
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily
Yeah. I don't think it is always necessary. Well,
and it
especially
depends on how formal you want to go.
it depends on how formal you want to go, and it depends on because like a lot of people worry about regurgitating the same information over and over again. Like if you were wanting to create like a unique perspective on something, like
Although
let's pretend that I want
I
to
do quote Deirdre a lot from doing constructionist work. I love Deirdre.
Derrida was a very like that's a very interesting critical lens to look the literary the criticism lenses. Everyone look those up. Use those as a form of as a tool for media literacy, right? I could literally, and I have done this before, I've analyzed the Godzilla franchise through a queer theory lens. How is Godzilla and the characters within the franchise queer code? There's so many things you could do. Have people often talked about that? Not so much.
I got bullied on Reddit by in the David Lynch subreddit because first of all, I fell asleep during the Inland Empire during my latest viewing of Inland Empire.
How
And
dare you?
I mentioned it during my review. And then the second thing was I did a feminist review of the literature and I was asking people to critique my writing for Substack. And people were like, this was the worst thing that I've ever read. Why are you
Ari,
analyzing this from a feminist perspective? Feminists are so stupid.
my dear Ari, why would you go on Reddit and ask for people to criticize your writing? That's literally opening Pandora's box.
I mean, it depends on the subreddit, but not all subreddits
Oh,
are misogynistic.
I don't know. You have opinions about TikTok. I have opinions about Reddit. Both of them can be toxic in their own unique
The journaling
ways.
subreddit is nice and soft, and the Nerd Fighters subreddit is very nice.
It's been a long time since I've been on the Godzilla subreddit. I'm kind of terrified to go back. Well, so we have a couple minutes left. So how can we improve misinformation and media through media literacy? One, obviously, like it's going to help us confront, you know, that and misinformation that we might see across social media. We've already mentioned a few tools that you could use, right? Like DOI sources. Ari shared some details about how to access
Sci-Hub.
those.
Go to Sci-Hub. SCI-HUB. Sci-Hub.
Sci-Hub.
I think it's .com or .edu or .net. I can't
One
remember.
of one of those. Just
If you
tinker
Google search, it
around.
will pop up. It's search Sci-Hub.
And use that SQ3 arc reading comprehension method if maybe you don't like reading and because honestly the more reading you do, I firmly believe that it's opening the door for media literacy to improve as well. um
And you don't even
and
need to read that much. Just read like an hour a day
yeah,
before
like
bed. Just put
it,
the phone down. Just read for an hour. You can get Kindle on your phone. You can get a library.
yeah.
You can get a Libby app from the library.
Yes, and honestly, most like scholars in reading like education will say that you read at your best when you break it down into chunks, right? Like an
Mhm.
hour. Like you don't want to like sit and like read for 6 hours because you're not like you'll be skimming and you won't be retaining that information, right?
Right.
Um, the other tool that we proposed, and this is just like basic from what we talked about, if you see misinformation on social media, or if you see like an article with a very like alarming, like, you know, shock value title, like it's okay to have emotions, right? But know that your emotional reaction doesn't necessarily have to be the end all be all, right? Like go out and corroborate what you see.
Also, read the article and see what they actually have to say. And sometimes, if you look at the studies that they actually like reference in the article, it'll say something completely different than what they're trying to shock you with.
Because the truth is, title writing always is on social media is always intending to get the most clicks possible.
Like, especially with those health related articles,
Oh,
they always try to get you with those health related articles, and like the they'll reference some study where the study group is like 10 people, and they're like, yeah, how can you make that
it's
claim
like
based
how
on
reputable can that be, right?
like the people that they did that study on was so small, like you can't even, it's not even worth it.
Right. So there's methods, there's tricks, and the I think the important thing is just granting yourself the grace. And I've had this conversation with family during the pandemic. If you see a concerning article posted and you have an emotional reaction, like try to ask those important questions of like who is this aimed at? Is this reputable? Like what is the study behind it, right? Before sharing it, because whenever you share something, that just continues to disseminate the misinformation, right? So,
Yeah, because newscore.xzy.org is not a reputable company.
no, no, not at all.
Especially
Ari,
with all those like ads.
right. Final words, final thoughts of the evening.
Go out. Use your best judgment.
Be nerdy and read with us.
Be nerdy. Read more.
So, everyone, the next couple of weeks we have off. It's going to be our kind of like mid-spring break, and we will be back for Pride Month, the first week of June, and we're gonna start our Pride episodes for the year. Woo! We're pretty excited about that. Expect sparkles, rainbows, and
Laser.
fabulosity and lasers. All right, everyone, we love you. Have a good rest of your night. Click like, subscribe, all of that jazz, and we will see you next time. Bye.